Hello and welcome to episode 3 of Chatterbox. My name is Callum and I'm an associate artist at Playbox Theatre, the company behind Chatterbox. So welcome to our ongoing series of conversations with actors and industry leaders that we hope will keep all of us engaged with the arts during this tricky time. Now, did you hear? Boris Johnson actually used the word theatre in the House of Commons this week. I cannot wait to talk to our guest in 2 weeks' time, MP and Shadow Culture Secretary Tracy Brabin, about the recently announced roadmap for reopening theatres. That's going to be a really fascinating episode, so get your political hats dusted off and ready for that one. And as if that weren't enough, next week we're talking to Olivier-nominated playwright Laura Wade. Her play, Posh, which was turned into the film The Riot Club, was about the violent goings-on at an elite private dining society at Oxford University. One of the former members is now our Prime Minister. Make of that what you will. Now, before we meet today's guest, a super quick reminder that, as always, we want you to get involved in these conversations too. So if you're one of the lucky 100 young people with me now in this Zoom interview, then get those questions coming in. If you hover your mouse at the bottom of your screen on a laptop or the top of your screen on a mobile, you'll find a button you can click to send questions directly into my inbox. And importantly, you're going to be able to see the questions other people have already asked and vote for the ones you'd like to hear answered. The more votes, the higher they appear in my inbox. And as always, we will try to get through as many as we can. If you're watching live on Facebook, hello. Though you can't message in questions, we do still want to hear from you. So send us your reactions, your comments, your feedback to @PlayboxTheatre, #Chatterbox on Instagram, Twitter or Facebook. We don't mind which. Now, a brief trigger warning about today's episode. Today's conversation is going to cover some delicate topics. We're going to talk about physical intimacy on set and a storyline from sex education which involves a sexual assault. If you don't feel that's quite right for you today, then please have no fear in tuning out now. You can always head over to youtube.com/playboxtheatre and catch up on a previous episode instead. We've got the likes of George McKay, the creators of The Goes Wrong show, Charlie Russell and Dave Hearn, or even last week's episode, the star of Gangs of London, Chope Dirisu. Now, it's time to introduce my special guest. Aimee Lou Wood needs no introduction, but I'll do it anyway. Aimee graduated from RADA just a few years ago in 2017. Her first professional credit came before her final year of training had even finished, when she performed in Robert Icke's production of Mary Stuart at the Almeida Theatre in London, before joining the UK tour of People, Places and Things with the National Theatre and Headlong. In 2019, she made her screen debut in Netflix's smash hit coming-of-age comedy Sex Education, in which she plays series regular Aimee Gibbs. She was most recently seen on stage in UNCLE VANYA in the West End alongside Richard Armitage and Toby Jones. Let's take a look at some of Aimee's best bits and funniest lines from Sex Education.
My auntie got eaten by wasps.
What? She stung to death?
No, she was eaten.
Does he remind you of someone? Adam? No, I was thinking more like a boiled Ryan Gosling.
No, he's probably going to be president or something.
We don't have presidents in this country, Aimee.
You know, top-heavy Steve's? Built like a chupa chup.
Okay, where is it?
Oh, I don't know. I just sort of arrive places.
Are you having a good time?
I think so.
No, the succulent! I love your outfit.
Thank you.
Oh, no. Aimee, I'm sorry, I'm really nervous.
Oh, my parents are going to kill me. They barely got over the last party. Why'd you have another one then? Ruby and Olivia said they couldn't do it at their houses. Anyway, I love hosting.
My ham. Have you ever tried a mind map?
I love mind maps.
I don't really know what I want to do when I leave school. But I always know when I have a spot coming, so maybe I'll become a facialist. What are you doing here?
Getting the bus. We're all getting the bus.
I used to be
so thrilled to welcome our third guest to Series 2 of Chatterbox, the incredible Aimee Lou Wood. Aimee, thank you. Hello. Thank you so much for joining us today. How are you holding up in isolation?
I'm holding up quite well, although this quite oppressive heat has hit. I was saying to you before, and I think I slightly need to hydrate a bit more because...
You're not one of these people dashing off to the seaside then?
No. No way.
Now, look, our first question comes from last week's guest, Shope Dirisu. He says, and we're jumping straight in at the deep end here, is the attention that's come from the success that you've had what you thought it would be, and how are you managing it?
Yeah, I don't think I ever really thought about it properly. I just kind of didn't want to because I didn't want to get too overwhelmed. When I got the part, I just kind of thought, okay, and when you're filming, you're in this little bubble, so you don't really think about other people seeing it. It's like when you're in rehearsals for a play and you just think you're going to be rehearsing forever. And, I think, have you gone?
Oh, are you there? Have we lost you already, Aimee? Oh no, Aimee was a little worried about her Wi-Fi before this started. Oh, you're back.
Hello, I'm back. Should I? Yeah. Where did... Oh, you've gone again. Have you? No, you haven't. You're back. Sorry, you went on mine too. Yeah, sorry, what did you hear?
You were saying it's like a rehearsal process. You're in a little bubble whilst you're on set.
Yeah, and then you kind of forget that it's going to be watched by millions of people. And then when it is, it's kind of a weird... Because you spend 5 months just with this character and with this cast, and it's very kind of cozy and supportive and lovely. And then it's really scary. Like the first day it came out, it was so strange because all of a sudden you feel like you're at the mercy of all these people who are watching it, who are kind of going to go away with their opinions of, like, it's very, especially for someone like me who's quite a people pleaser, and I kind of like try to control what people think of me by like, this is who I am. Don't make any, I'm really nice. Hello. But you can't do that when millions of people are watching it, and they're just you just kind of have to give yourself over to the fact that people are going to be able to watch you for 8 hours. People are going to feel like they really, really know you. And especially having the same name as a character as well is weird, because you go on the street and people are saying Aimee and you're thinking, do I know you, or have you seen Sex Education? And it is a little bit unnerving at times. And I'm just getting to the point where I can be grateful for the support, but also allow myself to feel a little bit kind of nervous and anxious at times about it. I think I thought like that was ungrateful to say at first.
Because you've got sort of like 1.8 million followers on Instagram, which is like 3 times the population of Manchester. I imagine with that, does a feeling of responsibility come with that? Do you feel like you have to sort of use your platform in a positive way, or are you able to kind of keep that a personal endeavour?
Yeah, I think I do feel, well, it's quite lovely in a way, because it just means that you do feel the responsibility, but I think at first I felt a bit too much of one, because it was so new and novel, and certain things in sex education are obviously very relatable and important subjects and topics. So at first I was way too involved in my message requests that would come through, and I feel like I wanted to reply to everyone who said, oh, thank you, I really related to this, I just want some advice, blah, blah. And I would it would become a kind of full-time job if you did that. So it is hard to detach from it. But you kind of have to. You have to go, right, I can use my platform and my social media in a positive way, but also keep myself safe and not engage too much with it, because otherwise I think it becomes very overwhelming and kind of mentally draining. And also, I remember my therapist saying, because I think, I just feel so exposed and so observed. And she goes, well, do you feel like that? Would you feel like that if you weren't checking your Instagram? Or is that kind of the reminder of how many people know who you are? Because I guess like in the street, you'll bump into people who recognize you, but that might be 4 or 5 people rather than 1.8 million, or, so you can deal with the 4 and 5 that you bump into. So stop kind of reminding yourself of how out there you are and how public you are as a person. You don't need to. So I definitely try and limit myself a bit more with that stuff now.
And of course, most of those 1.8 million, as you say, know you from Sex Education. And for anyone who's not seen Sex Education, you might be watching, it's a collection of sort of gloriously anarchic coming-of-age stories. But what's so unique about it is that it's also really truthful to the experiences of young people now. But I wanted to ask about this, the now element of it, because although we sort of recognise the world completely, it's kind of set in the UK, but then the school feels like an American high school, and the kids all got mobile phones, but the design is very like 1980s. I just wanted to ask about that kind of, time, location, non-specificness. Do you think that's part of the reason the show is so popular?
I think it is. Ben, our director, he was really great and imaginative with that stuff because he loves all the John Hughes movies from the 80s and that kind of aesthetic. And we do too. Everyone who's in it just loves how it looks. It's very kind of exciting, colourful, and it's just kind of joyful in the way that it is visually. But I think it also means that everyone can access it because it is kind of timeless and placeless. And I think it means that you just relate to the characters more and you feel like the characters are the things that you really latch onto and relate to rather than the setting, because that's kind of otherworldly and ambiguous. And I think it just means that people of all ages, because it doesn't look like a school now, but it doesn't look like a school in the 80s, but it doesn't look like, so kind of parents who watch it can feel, an affinity with a character. Everyone can feel connected to it in a way that I think would be more limited if it looked like Grange Hill or whatever. Because then that's very specifically kind of a British school. So I think it really works. I know that at first people were a bit like, what is this? Some people found it really baffling because they think it was in the 80s and then all of a sudden someone whips out a phone. But I like how phones aren't too much of a feature in it as well, because I think that in kind of 10 or 20 years when Instagram doesn't exist anymore or whatever, it will still be relatable. It will still feel, it doesn't feel like it's dated. It feels like it could be watched forever, which I love as well.
Yeah, I think it's got the kind of universal feel, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
And as the name of the show suggests, there is some physical intimacy in the episodes as well. And it's worth saying straight off the bat that one of the most brilliant things about Sex Education is that none of that ever feels gratuitous. It's always plot and character driven. But I'd love to hear a little about your experiences working with Ita O'Brien. Now, because Ita is an intimacy director, which is a sort of relatively new role in film and theatre, I think. And an intimacy director is somebody who's responsible for, I think, correct me if I'm wrong here, choreographing scenes, but also making sure that actors are kind of physically and psychologically safe when working on intimate material. Yeah. I just wondered what that process was like with Ita. How does she approach that kind of work?
Yeah, it's amazing. And I couldn't believe that it's such a new thing. And I've spoken to lots of other actors who kind of say to me, oh God, when I first started and I had to do sex scenes, it was so traumatic because it was just kind of like, and I mean, the way that we talk about it is that you'd have a stunt coordinator or a fight coordinator to choreograph those kind of physical scenes. So why not have that for an intimate scene? And it safeguards the whole thing. And there's a lot of kind of backlash being like, but doesn't it take away kind of the acting element of it? Like, but actually it makes that even better because they give you a framework that you can then imbue with character, but it's something that you can trust. And I mean, the way that Ita does it is the first thing that we did was we had this kind of icebreaker workshop and we watched lots of different animal mating styles. And then we had to imitate those animals. And basically it means that when we're doing an intimate scene, Ita can shout from the sidelines, this bit's more horse, or this bit's more bonobo. And it means that you're kind of separating yourself from the scene, which is actually so, it means that it doesn't cost you too much. When I watch those scenes back, they look really realistic, but I'm kind of laughing to myself because I'm going, I was honestly neighing. I was neighing at that point, and it works somehow, but it means that you don't have to kind of call upon your own stuff. You don't have to be too personal with it, which I think is really, really important. And Ita's just kind of there every step of the way in those scenes to check, touch, are you comfortable being touched here? And it's all, and consent, everything is talked through before you start, and then you rehearse it, in your tracksuit, you rehearse it all, and you run through like a routine, a dance routine. You run through it so many times until you're fully comfortable with it. And then you just talk about the story and how those specific characters are in that scene. And it becomes just really creative and collaborative, and you can just check in along the way. And she'll check in kind of 1 or 2 days after as well, after you've done the scene, to
great.
say, how are you feeling? I mean, there was one time that I felt a little bit vulnerable about one of the scenes that I did, and I just told Ita, and it meant that I got to go in and sit with the director, and I watched the scene that I'd filmed kind of over and over again until I was just, I'd like just confirmed in my head that it was okay. And they were so kind of patient and supportive and completely understanding. And, it felt like if I wasn't happy with it, they would have reshot it, which is great. But I was in the end. Yeah.
And I imagine that's so important, particularly as one of your storylines involved a sexual assault.
Yeah.
And that storyline was just so important because it begins with Aimee sort of unable to recognise what's happened to her.
Yeah, yeah.
Again, feels a really honest to a lot of young people's experiences.
Yeah.
I wondered if you would talk a little bit about why you think Aimee pretends it hasn't happened, or perhaps isn't sure if what has happened is just a normal thing that she's supposed to deal with.
Yeah, I think that Aimee, her kind of body reacts to it, and she knows physically that what has happened is wrong, because she knows when she shuts the door at the end of the day, she starts crying. So there's kind of a physiological reaction to it, but mentally she hasn't actually caught up with her body yet. It takes her a long time because she just simply doesn't understand. She hasn't had a chat. She hasn't had a person who has taught her about consent or anything like that. So she's actually just really confused. And I think that a lot of women are, we kind of feel that if it's something isn't violent and you don't kind of, there isn't a violent crime, or a violent assault, then it's kind of just a thing that women have to go through. It's kind of that boys will be boys, and it's unfortunate, but you kind of just have to grin and bear it because that's the way of the world. And I think that Aimee is embarrassed, especially when she kind of looks around after it's happened and no one comes to help her. And I think actually the really pivotal point for Aimee is that no one comes to help her, because I think that she's traumatized by the assault itself, but I think she has such a faith in humanity, and she really does believe that most people are good and they're nice and they're friendly, which is why she smiles at everyone. And even her mean friends from season 1, she still thinks that, she doesn't think they're bad people. She just knows that she should defend Maeve in that moment, but she doesn't think they're evil or anything like that. And I think that she kind of, all of a sudden, that faith and all that hope that she has in the world is kind of smashed because she looks around and no one comes to her defense. And I think that's what really makes her think, oh, then obviously it wasn't a bad thing. It wasn't a bad thing because nobody stepped in, and it's just a funny kind of embarrassing thing that I'll just shrug off and everything will be fine. But actually her body goes into this shock and this kind of PTSD that she gets from it that doesn't, and I think it's great because she goes through the storytelling wise, she goes through all the cycles of grief instead of it just being boom, she's over it. Or,
I was going to ask about that, because that's one of the things that I thought was so fantastic about your performance over those episodes, was how clear the stages of processing were, from, denial through shame, fear, and then sort of eventually, it's not quite ownership, is it? But sort of regaining a feeling of self-worth, perhaps.
Yeah.
And it was masterful watching you do that. I just wondered if there was did you feel any pressure as a performer having to kind of realistically represent the experiences of young women who may have experienced a similar thing?
I did. I kind of felt its importance as it was happening, and that would be quite nerve-wracking, but I had a lot of support on set from the directors and my castmates. Like, they were amazing. But I think that, and we spoke a lot. We just kept talking and we kept the dialogue really going. But I did think it was quite difficult and challenging playing someone who's younger, who's at just a different stage of life, because I was thinking how I would react in this situation now would be very different. And I really had to think back to what it felt like when I was 17 and how I didn't really have the same, just, I don't know, I mean, worldliness might be the wrong word, but I just didn't have the maturity because I was just younger. And that was quite a thing. No, Amy's not at this point yet. Aimee Lou Wood would do this, but Aimee Gibbs is at a completely different stage of her life. That moment in detention with all those girls is really a turning point for her. That's kind of she really does go from girlhood to womanhood, and like and this solidarity, that female solidarity and that help that she gets from all the other young women is just, it's a real like tectonic shift for her. So I kind of had to really cast my mind back and be the Amy, the character, so that I could get that kind of delayed, that processing, because it's very easy to think, oh, I'll just play the kind of, you don't want to play the end of her journey at the start, because actually it's a long processing, slow burn, and that's what makes it so realistic and relatable. Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the start of your journey, Aimee Lou Wood, Amy. Let's talk about your first job, as I mentioned, was before you'd even graduated from RADA, when you performed in Mary Stuart at the Almeida. How did that come about?
So Juliet Stevenson was in Mary Stuart, and there were these 4 handmaiden roles that hadn't been cast. And I think it was her that came up with the idea to get the final year RADA women to play those parts as a kind of first job work experience vibe. So we did it on a cycle. So I was in the first group of 4, which meant that I got to do the rehearsal stuff, which was kind of invaluable, because I just got to actually see what a rehearsal room was like and watch these Leah Williams and Juliet Stevenson and Robert Icke. It was kind of incredible, but it was so great, that experience. I mean, we came on at the final, I think, 10 minutes, and we had to be in sobs. Like, we had to be sobbing because our queen was going to be executed. So we'd all be stood, and it was kind of a great test of how we get to that zone, like how we all work as different actors, because some of us were sat listening to a really, really sad song to try and go there. Some of us just managed to turn it on straight away. Some of us were doing all the emotional recall and emotional prep. But it was amazing. It was just, the boys were so jealous. The guys were so jealous.
I bet they were, yeah.
They were seething. But it was amazing.
That show started with a coin flip to decide whether it was Leah or Juliet who would play Elizabeth and Mary. So, each night you were a handmaiden to a different Mary Stuart. Did that change the performance for you at all? Did Leah and Juliet have different approaches to that scene?
Oh, yeah, they're so different to each other, and they're both amazing in completely their own ways. And so that coin toss would be so exciting, because you'd think, well, it's going to be a completely different play. Juliet's Elizabeth is completely different to Leah's Elizabeth, and their Marys are so different. And they just brought a completely different but equally amazing energy that meant that our performances would change as well, depending on who was Mary. And that was exciting too, about kind of being in the moment and like listening and actually receiving on stage, because if you were with Juliet, it was going to be really different than if you were with Leah, and there wasn't kind of a block way of doing something. So that was exciting, and it kept us on our toes, and it was great.
I loved it. I saw it at the Almeida, and I was awed by you handmaidens being able to come on at that point in the show, a few hours in, and just have to come in at like 100 miles an hour. We
were all freaking out backstage. We had this kind of tent thing that we all got ready in, and we'd be like, right, guys, come on, how are we going to cry tonight? Come on. It was intense, but it was great.
Oh, look, it's probably time to hear some of the many questions that have been buzzing away in my inbox. But we're going to kick off by getting someone up on screen to ask a question to you, camera to camera. Now, Rich, our technical magician, is going to bring Ed onto your screen. Ed is a member of Playbox, the youth theatre who produced Chatterbox, and Ed is always sending in the most interesting questions for our guests. So I'm thrilled that we've got him on screen with us now. Hello, Ed.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. I think you've got a question for Aimee.
Yes, I do. As a person who is still on the edge of deciding whether to go to drama school or just go straight into the industry, is there any advice you could give on preparing for drama school? Like what you can do to help, just like skills going into it? And is there any positives to go to drama school? And if there's any, is there any cons?
Good question. I wasn't ready. The first year that I tried for drama school, I am so glad I didn't get in. And at the time, I was distraught. But now I look back and I think that was so right for me, is that I just wasn't, because it's very, very intense and it's full on. And I think some people can go at 18 straight out of school and handle it really well. But I did need I did a foundation course, and then I actually had a year out after that as well. And I feel like I was still only just about ready to go. And so I would say that don't rush. Like if you don't have to just launch into it. I think just be fully aware of how intense it is, and don't feel like you have to and you could try and do a bit of acting and go to acting classes, you don't have to go straight there. I think there's a pressure to kind of get in, boom, straight away. And actually most people don't get in till their third or fourth year. And the older people in there were always way more prepared for it, I think, but I would also say when you're doing your monologues and choosing all that stuff, just really kind of choose something that is you, that feels authentic to you. Like don't try and show off your acting, like don't chops, because I feel like in the first year that I tried, I was getting out all the tricks, and actually all they wanted to see was who I was, because really they don't need you to be some finished product. You're going to be there for 3 years, so they just want to see that you're a good kind of company member and you've got something individual and genuine. So I think that, just be, it sounds so kind of cheesy, but be yourself, because that is really what they want to see, rather than a kind of polished performer. I think just choose something that makes your soul sing when you perform it, and it'll be great. But also, I think lots of people that I've worked with haven't trained, and they're amazing. The one thing that I've kind of noticed that's different is that there's more of a kind of, when we rehearse things on set, there's more of a embarrassment from people who haven't gone to drama, or say when we did that animal mating ice breaking workshop, all the drama school kids were straight on in there. They had no qualms about it. It was just kind of like no embarrassment, because they've had 3 years of embarrassing themselves over and over again. Whereas the people who hadn't trained were a bit more like, what the hell is this? So I think it's good in a way that it knocks down all of your kind of self-consciousness and your ego. It kind of takes your ego away. But I guess like Playbox and things like that I didn't have anything like that growing up. So drama school for me was really the first time that I properly learned how, or explored my acting, because it was very limited at my school. And so I guess some people are more armed than I was when I went to drama school. I basically knew nothing. I couldn't believe. And actually, someone in my year went to Playbox, and they knew. I was like, why is this person ready to leave drama school and amazing in first year? So I think if you've been to a great kind of theatre club thing, then people were really kind of on it in drama school. But I was just about ready.
Right.
Does that answer your question, Ed?
Perfectly. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ed.
Nice to see you, Ed. See you soon.
Nice to see you. See ya.
Bye.
And now, before we head over to the Q&A, earlier on, Aimee, we launched a little poll on our Instagram takeover, and we gave everyone the chance to pitch a question for you to answer. And we picked our favourite two, and we held a vote. And the question people wanted to know the answer to, and it got 78% of the vote. How do you prepare yourself for scenes?
How do I prepare myself for scenes? How do I prepare myself for scenes? Filming or theatre?
Well, shall we deal with filming? Because also sometimes you're kind of filming out of order, aren't you?
Well, exactly, because a play is, so you have that, you always have the arc and you have the journey. So it's a lot easier to kind of feel in something when you're doing a play. I think the skill of, and screen actors who have kind of done it for years are so good at it, of just knowing exactly where they are in the story and exactly where they need to be. I thought that you could spend as much time as you needed to kind of get into the zone. And actually then I got on set and people were just like, right, Aimee, we need to go now. And it's kind of exciting and it's great and it's very fast paced, especially on TV, because they've got so much that you need to get through in a day. And it's such a supportive atmosphere, but it is very much, it is fast paced. And you've kind of just, I feel like just knowing exactly where you are in that kind of arc of your character, because you might film something from episode 8 before you film something from episode 5, and you're going to be completely back and forth. And actually that's the hardest part, I think, is kind of just making sure that you know exactly where your character is, where she's been, what she's been up to, you know, what headspace she's in, and doing all that stuff kind of the night before, like definitely solidifying it all so that when you go in, you're ready. And also you will have a rehearsal, like you'll run through it, but that's usually more for kind of like technical side of stuff. So what the camera's going to be doing and all that. So, but use that time as well, because I think a lot of people kind of walk it through in those technical rehearsals. And that's what I did at first, because it was kind of embarrassment of being like, oh, I don't want to properly act while, you know, we're just kind of doing a walkthrough. But actually now I'm like, no, get over that kind of embarrassment, because it is great time to just like rehearse and actually rehearse. Don't hold back on it, because also the director will love that, because he gets more of it, or she gets more of an idea of what the scene's going to be. So I think, yeah, actually use those rehearsals is what I would say, because I definitely didn't at first. I kind of mucked about in those technical rehearsals.
That's great. At Millie Neighbour, thank you for that question. And in fact, Millie, that's the second week on the trot you've won the vote now. So other Chatterboxers out there, you're going to have to up your game next week. So let's take it across to the Q&A and see what we have in the inbox here. Here we go, right at the top, from Ruby Riley. It's had 14 votes. What was the best advice you have received about the industry?
What is the best advice? I think just like know yourself, just because it's very easy to start defining who you are from what other people are telling you, whether that's what kind of castings come through for you, what auditions come through. You know, you start kind of looking externally to figure out who you are, but actually you already know it, and holding on to that kind of integrity and that self-belief. And not typecasting yourself and not making yourself two-dimensional, because it's so easy to do that, because you go, oh, I get the funny parts, so I'll just be the funny person, or I'll be. And actually what's so wonderful is that as actors, we don't have to limit ourselves, because we have our imagination and we can be everything. And that's what we did when we were kids. We were everything. But then you get into the casting world and all the audition stuff, and you start kind of limiting yourself. And I think don't kind of apologize and dilute yourself.
That's great.
Yeah.
Harry would like to know, what's it like playing a character that's 6 or so years younger than you? Do you find there are any particular challenges in it? Yeah,
I do, but it's weird how quickly it all floods back to you. Like when you've got the setting, you know, you've got the art directors, you've got everything going on with the school, and the world is so well made that you start kind of just, if you truly like live in it, you do start just feeling like you're at school again, and it's kind of, it all kind of flows out. And also Aimee is there's a lot of similarities between me and her of how I was when I was at school, so that made it easily accessible for me. But I think, yeah, just again kind of taking away a judgment, because I think it's quite easy as someone who's older to go, well, of course you shouldn't be with the untouchables. Of course you should be standing up for Maeve and you know, being strong and empowered, but actually she's at school and she's in this terrifying world where there's a hierarchy and everyone's a bit mean and everyone's kind of looking after themselves and playing a character or playing a stereotype. So I think just, removing that judgment and remembering how scary and turbulent that time was.
That's great. Maeve asks, as a northerner, did you find it particularly hard to break into the industry? Were there any barriers? And did you ever feel out of place at drama school?
I did feel at times at drama school, like my accent, I could say anything and people would laugh. And I'd think, I didn't actually say anything funny then, but it was just my accent that people found amusing. And it was actually very loving and it wasn't from a nasty place. But I think that, when you're in London for drama school, there is a kind of, someone said to me on my first weekend at drama school, he was from Liverpool and he said, oh, you're going to completely lose your accent. That'll be gone within a year. And I remember thinking in my head, I will not lose my accent. and I actually, it definitely mellowed, because I've listened back to things from first year and I've gone, oh, wow. Because I think there's going to be natural, like environmentally, it's going to start kind of changing because you're hanging around with people who speak in a certain way. But I do think on the whole, people love it and appreciate it so much when someone has a regional accent, and even if there's parts that I get called in for that are RP roles, I'll usually go in ready to do my RP after I've worked years to get my RP badge at RADA, and then they'll go, oh, scrap that, just do your own accent, do it, speak in your own voice. So I think there's a massive kind of, I was talking about this yesterday, there's been a massive shift. I think that it's not really, there's no kind of shame around it anymore. It's how some older actors will say that they really felt like they had to iron out their accent, whereas now it's definitely about embracing it.
That's great. Emily Pepper asks, what has been your most exciting part that you've ever played?
Well, I played, my first favourite part was at drama school in my third year when I played a part called Margaret in a play called Scuttlers, because it was kind of the first time that I really played a part that was kind of, I was in harmony with. I was kind of like, oh, this is me. This is a bit of me, this part. And it kind of, there was a difference to how I've kind of felt that I've been a bit square peg round hole before that. So that was the first kind of, but then I think probably for Aimee, I love Aimee so much, but also Sonia that I just played in UNCLE VANYA, because that was just so, it was so exciting. When I got that part, I could not believe it. I thought, this is hilarious, because I felt like it was the most unlikely thing for me to do, because at drama school there were all the girls that I would have put as Sonia in a Chekhov play, and I was terrible in my Chekhov term. I didn't get it at all. I went about it completely the wrong way. So I think for surprise element, Sonia.
Well, you were great in that show. And it was directed by, this is a personal question here, it was directed by Ian Rickson, who I've seen a few of his shows, and I always leave thinking the actors are brilliant, sort of understated, detailed, really moving. Yeah. Does he have any sort of trade secrets? Are there exercises that he gets you to do to help investigate characters?
A lot. We do a lot of improvs, kind of backstory improvisation. So I even did one where I was 7 or 6, and it was the first time that I ever saw the Doctor, who I'm in love with in the play. And if there's anything mentioned in the play, like, oh, Vanya and Sonia work at the market, then Toby and I would go and improvise as Vanya and Sonia at the market. So we had, and it just means it's really helpful, because when you're talking about it in the scene, you have an actual memory of that. And so I think it adds a lot of texture. And Ian's very kind of emotional. He definitely leads from the heart center. He's into all of his chakras, and he's definitely a heart guy. So he'll always kind of connect back to actually what's your super objective? What do you want more than anything? And so he's very emotionally led, which can be quite vulnerable at times. But and scary, but really, really great. Yeah.
We'll go back to the Q&A now. Tilly asks, Tilly says, how did you find the courage to talk about the personal issues you faced in your life?
Well, the first time that I really went there talking about personal issues was with in an interview that I did where I spoke about my body dysmorphia with a guy called Josh, who is an amazing interviewer, but he's also my friend. So the interview, everyone's like, oh my God, these two have but we actually are friends. And I felt so safe. And we discussed it before. He said, how would you feel? You know, it wasn't a bombardment. It wasn't like all of a sudden he was asking about personal stuff. He said beforehand, how would you feel if we spoke about your eating disorder and that kind of stuff? And I said, yeah, that I completely trust you. And I knew that it was coming from a really good place from him, which would be that, you know, a lot of young people would watch that, and well, any age would watch that and feel like they were less alone, I guess. And I think that it was scary because I started crying and then they kind of said, do you want us to cut that bit out? And so they asked me if they didn't want, and I said, no, I think just leave it in because it's authentic and I don't want to edit. I think that especially because we live in such a social media time, people really edit their realities, and I think it can make people feel kind of inadequate or you know, dissatisfied with their own life because they're thinking, look at how perfect this person's life is, but it's all edited and it's all lies and fallacy. So I think I was very much just like, no, keep it in because that's real. I cried in that moment because it means a lot to me. And so it's kind of, it was scary, but I also think sex education again really helped me with that. Just the subject matters in the subjects and the topics in the show are very much encouraging you to kind of be your authentic self and be courageous and find the strength within vulnerability. So the show has definitely helped me a lot with that.
Well, I mean, Shayna here says, not really a question. She just wants to say thank you. She says she has body dysmorphia as well, along with an eating disorder. And hearing you talk about your own struggles has been really inspirational and made her not hate her body for a minute. So,
oh my God, thank you. I'm so grateful. That means so much. Thank you.
Danai asks, what do you do to prepare for auditions?
What do I do? Well, I read the script.
Very good.
I read the script and I learn. I think that learning lines, I have to say them out loud. I've realised that if I sit there and just try and jam it all in, it does not work. So I kind of, if I've got a friend free who can just run the lines with me and make it fun, you know, make it a fun thing. It can be daunting, you know, you get these sides through for this audition and you think, oh God, I really want this part, but there's so much pressure around it and it starts to feel like the be all and end all. So I think kind of if you've got a mate or your mum or your sister, anyone who you can just run the lines with, make it a fun thing, actually get up on your feet and just kind of, I don't know, have fun with it rather than kind of taking it as this kind of, you know, very, very serious task. That for me anyway, because then I get really nervous. If I've isolated myself and gone away and crammed all this stuff the night before or however many nights you get set before you get sent it, I'll always bring that with me into the audition. I'll bring that element of, I've been really freaking out. Hello, how are you? You know, and then it just won't, I'll be so in my head and I'll be thinking about everything that I've written on the script that I won't actually be in the moment. So I think, yeah, just kind of learn your lines and go in prepared, but also be very prepared to be redirected as well. You know, don't kind of I have a way of saying this line that's really good and this is going to get me the part, because you're going to go in and the chances are that that's going to be completely scarpered, your plans. So just go in with a very kind of open like vibe.
Great. Ed says, a different Ed, how do you think your training at RADA has pushed you and your career in the industry?
It's a great drama school. So third year, just practically, you know, lots of industry people come and watch. So you've got kind of really good exposure in that way. But that's kind of, you know, you get to that point and everyone just, you've been in this year group for 2 years And it's kind of sad that all of a sudden it's all the industry stuff starts to get introduced, because before that it's so just, when you act, it's for you and for each other. It's kind of, you're doing a performance in front of your mates, and it's this fun chance to kind of show how you've grown as an actor and developed and what you've learned. Or if you do make a massive mistake, it's also a hilarious anecdote when you've done a terrible performance. It's a very safe, loving environment. So I think it definitely kind of, the best thing I got from RADA is probably just, I definitely kind of try and remember the joy in it. Kind of, I remember RADA, and actually why did I start doing this and what did I love while I was at school was just do it like storytelling with my friends, and that's what it's really all about. So and I like that you don't really get exposed to too much industry stuff until the absolute end. It's very much let's mine for, let's mine and let's do the work and let's explore stuff, and then all of that stuff can just come at the end and blah blah blah. But yeah, I think just finding the joy in it.
Excellent. Now look, we've probably only got about 10 minutes to go. Should we try and rattle through as many as we can? Because there's loads in here that we're not going to get through them all. I'm so sorry, everyone. But let's see how many we can get through. So Joe says, what type of roles do you want to play in the future?
What types of roles? People my age.
Excellent. Very good. Isabella, did you ever expect sex education to blow up the way it has?
I had a sneaky feeling while I was filming it, and I realised, oh God, this is actually really good. And I thought it might do, but I thought it was going to be a kind of cult following. So no, I didn't expect it to be as big as it is.
Excellent. Christelle, how was your experience auditioning for sex education?
I went in for a completely different part 3 times. I went in for Lily, the kind of sci-fi writing girl. And I thought, oh, brilliant, because she was supposed to have braces on, Lily, originally. And I thought, oh, great, because I always had this chip about, well, I'm not going to get on a Netflix show with non-perfect teeth. So I thought my way in was going to be Lily, who wears braces. And then I got called in 3 times, and they were kind of great. And then they said, can you come back for Aimee, who's like one of the popular girls? And I thought, oh, they're just being polite. And then got the sides through and thought, oh, these are things that I've said verbatim. And I went in, and it was my name spelt my way, and it kind of felt a little bit like fate. And then I went in, and and it was great. And I got the part.
Amazing. Polly says, how does your process differ from camera and stage?
Do you know what? It doesn't really. And I think that's been a really helpful thing for me to realise, is that I don't have to. Because I think while I was at drama school, I got into this very kind of obsessive thinking of screen actors do nothing. Everything is very stripped back, and it's very kind of subtle and, and kind of deadpan. And good screen acting is basically not moving your face, And then actually it's still just completely about the character and the story. You might get a part for a TV show or a film that is a very kind of exuberant, outgoing character. So you can't be cool screen actor. You can't be Ryan Gosling in Drive in everything that you do. There's going to have to be, so it doesn't really change for me. It's still just very character story driven.
Excellent. Shayna, what has been your favourite scene you've done in sex education?
The bus scene, when we all got on the bus together.
That is a lovely moment. That is a really great moment.
That was my favourite scene. We were all in tatters. We were sobbing. We had to really hold it back. Then the director was like, guys, but it was very poignant moment.
It is. It's a really beautiful moment. Lee asks, where would you like to see Aimee Gibbs end up by the close of the series? And she says, P.S. lots of love from Detroit.
Oh, wow. Hello. Yeah. Where would I want to see? At the very end of sex education, or season 3? I just want to see her being really good at something, really, really good, and backing herself, She's whether that's baking or something else, just she's really kind of got something that because she's so content. Well, she seems to be being the kind of hype girl, the sidekick, the one who cheers everyone on. And actually, I think that it would be amazing for her to have her own thing. I really want her to discover what her thing is.
Nice. Maeve asks who your acting idol is.
Well, actually, I love Olivia Colman, which is kind of what everyone says these days. But I would like to say that I was on that train years and years and years ago.
Before she was cool.
Before she was cool, I watched Green Wing, where she was a tiny part, and I just thought she brought such a kind of weird and great energy every time she came on screen. So I really love her. And I also, this is kind of random, but it just popped into my head, I really love Sam Rockwell as well.
Nice. Yeah, great choices.
Yeah.
Harry asks, are you good friends with the cast of Sex Education? Do you keep in touch?
We do. We're very good friends. And I always thought that people were lying when they said they were best friends with their cast. But actually, you know, when at TV shows and they go, yeah, we're all best mates. And I'd think, no, you're not. But actually, we are. We are. Yeah.
Is there a sort of Sex Education WhatsApp group that you're all a part of?
There is a WhatsApp group. Yeah. And it's quite active.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Very good. Lottie says, and actually this ties in with a question from Spencer as well. So this is Lottie and Spencer. How do you keep positive and working after setbacks in the industry? Spencer adds things like getting rejected from auditions, being told that you're not good enough, etc.
Yeah. I think you have to allow yourself to have a bit of a wobble time, because I went through a stage where I felt like I was getting called back in 3 or 4 times. I'd go in and then it would always be a no at the end of everything. And it just gets to the point where you feel like, oh, but this is just part of being an actor. So you feel like you have to be really brave. And actually it's very human to feel terrible if you've been told no and you're not you're struggling and it feels like you're kind of hitting your head against a brick wall. So I think allow yourself to be a bit sad about it for a bit and just kind of have that cathartic rant with your mates and talk about everything and just keep talking and keep checking in on your actor friends as well, and they'll check in on you, and just I think just allowing yourself to feel whatever you're feeling rather than constantly thinking that you have to just put on a brave face all the time, because that's when you really start to internalize all the kind of self-doubt. Whereas I feel like if you talk about it and you say it, then you kind of release it and you can get that support that you need from your friends or, you know, your colleagues or whatever. Yeah.
That's lovely advice. This might have to be our last question.
Okay.
Lily asks, and it's a tough one. I just don't like this one. What's next?
What's next? Well,
what do you want to do next? And that's slightly different, actually.
Well, I'm doing season 3 of Sex Ed, which is very exciting. But what do I want to do? I would like to do a film, because I did do a film last year, which was great experience. But I would like to, I wasn't there that often, and I would quite like to see because it's so different to TV. It's completely different. And I think that I would like to just see what that world's like a bit more.
Fantastic. Well, best of luck for season 3.
Thank you.
That just about concludes episode 3 of Chatterbox. But before we wrap up, Aimee, I wondered if you'd be kind enough to share your lockdown list with us. Some things to keep us creatively stimulated in isolation.
Yes. So I was saying that there's a lot of pressure to be productive. And actually, you can't really be productive unless you're inspired. So I think kind of keeping inspired by watching really good shows. I watched Succession, and that really got the acting kind of what would I call that? Buzz going again. I got a bit fizzy. So I think just watch really inspiring things. Anything that makes you feel. We watched this time Alan Partridge, and that was so funny, and just seeing kind of. I think, and also another thing that I did was I signed up to Ancestry, and I started doing my family tree. Oh. And the reason why that's great is because you end up asking questions to your family members. You call up and ask them stuff that you wouldn't usually ask. And I feel like story-wise, if you want to do a bit of writing or you want to kind of, you know, figure out some new stories to tell, your family and kind of the older generations in your family have got so much to say and so much life to share with you that actually I had about a 4-hour chat with my nana after I started doing this family tree, where she told me so much, and that's really, really inspiring. And yeah, so I would say just kind of conversations and ask. I feel like lockdown has definitely kind of made us have more profound conversations with each other. Like when we speak, it's always a bit, maybe just because we're craving that human connection, that we kind of have really great conversations. So I think, yeah, maybe do your family tree.
That's nice. The family tree is great. And Succession, I agree, is brilliant. Matthew McFadden.
Oh my, that's who I was obsessed with. Him and cousin Greg, the guy who plays Greg. Hilarious. Love those two.
So funny. What a little double act.
So funny.
Now that is all we've got time for. So look, join me next time when I'll be talking to the Olivier-nominated playwright of Posh, Home I'm Darling, The Watsons, Colder Than Here, Breathing Corpses, and the smash hit movie The Riot Club with Sam Claflin. It is, of course, Laura Wade. Now, in the spirit of keeping the creative conversation going week to week, I think you've got a question for Laura, haven't you, Aimee?
I do. I have been writing something, and I just wanted to ask Laura how she kind of self-motivates on days where it's not flowing out, because there's certain days you wake up and you're super inspired and you're ready to go, and there are other days where you kind of feel like you're hitting a bit of a brick wall, and I would like to know how she motivates herself.
That is a great question. I want to know the answer to that as well. So let's tune in next week and see how Laura answers it. If you've enjoyed today's episode and you want to catch up on any of our previous episodes, you can head over to youtube.com/Playbox Theatre, where you'll find interviews with BAFTA, Olivier and Emmy-nominated actor Juliet Stevenson, multi-award-winning Hamlet Papa Essiedu, or even the Broadway rising star, Nasia Thomas. And don't forget, we'd love to hear what you think. So please do send us your thoughts, reactions, feedback to @PlayboxTheatre, #Chatterbox, on whatever social media platform you like to use. Now, before we wrap up, it's just a quick reminder that Playbox Theatre, the youth theatre who produced Chatterbox, are in the middle of a £50,000 fundraising appeal that's absolutely critical to its survival. So if you've enjoyed this episode and you want to support the company who make it, head over to justgiving.com/Playbox-Theatre. I've also got a couple of parish notices this week as well. Now, actually, coincidentally, Aimee, one of our Chatterbox co-streaming partners is actually your co-star, Asa Butterfield's former youth theatre, Yatty, the Young Actors Theatre in Islington. And they are wicked, and they're currently taking applications for their foundation course for 18 to 24-year-olds. Not only is it brilliant, but it's also the cheapest in the country. If you want to check that out, you can head over to youngactors.org.uk. And a big shout out to Playbox member, Ava. Now, Ava is a member of Playbox's early stages workshops, which means she hasn't even started school yet. And tomorrow, Ava is going to cycle and scoot a whole 10 miles to help raise money for Playbox. If anyone out there wants to sponsor Ava on her epic cycling adventure, you'll find all the details on Playbox Theatre's Twitter feed. And for everyone here at Chatterbox, good luck, Ava. All that leaves me to do is say a final thank you to Aimee Lou Wood for joining us today. Thank you so much, Aimee.
Thank you so much, and good luck, Ava. I'll sponsor you.
And thank you to all our Chatterbox partners up and down the country. We couldn't do it without you. And thank you to all of you out there for watching. Until next Friday, stay creative and see you soon. Goodbye.